Ethan Carter had spent years serving as a dedicated law enforcement officer in their quiet suburban town. He had seen things that would keep most people awake at night. But he had always managed to push through, believing that justice would ultimately prevail. His most notable case had been the takedown of a ruthless biker gang that had been running a lucrative trade in drugs and illegal weapons. The gang, known as the Black Reapers, had terrorized the community for years before Ethan and his team finally put an end to their reign. Their leader, a man who called himself Razor, had been sentenced to prison. Ethan remembered the trial vividly, the way Razor had stared at him from across the courtroom. A smirk tugging at his lips. And the last words he had spoken before being taken away, "This isn't over. Carter, I'll be seeing you." That had been nearly a decade ago. Over time, Ethan had moved on, focusing on raising his daughter Lily. She was the light of his life. The one thing that made all his sacrifices and hard work worthwhile. After his wife had passed away when Lily was just a toddler, he had devoted himself entirely to her. Their home, a modest, comfortable house on the outskirts of town, had become a sanctuary. A place where he could leave the horrors of his job behind and just be a father. And with Max, his loyal canine partner turned family pet, always by their side, he had felt secure. So when he heard that Razor had been released early, Ethan hadn't panicked. He had considered the possibility of retaliation but ultimately dismissed it. The gang had been dismantled. Their operations shut down. Razor was a broken man now. He had thought, just another ex-con trying to find his place in the world. That was his mistake. It was a crisp autumn afternoon. The kind where golden leaves danced in the breeze and the scent of burning wood lingered in the air. Ethan was at work, wrapping up paperwork on a routine case. Meanwhile, Lily, a bright-eyed 10-year-old with an untamable spirit, was playing in their backyard. Max, the ever-watchful German shepherd, lay nearby, his ears twitching at every distant noise. He was old now, but his instincts had never dulled. Lily giggled as she tossed a ball across the yard. Max launched after it, his muscular frame still impressive despite the years that had slowed him down. She cheered when he caught it midair and trotted back to her, tail wagging. Beyond the wooden fence that lined their property, the sound of motorcycles rumbled through the neighborhood. It wasn't unusual. Some locals rode bikes, enjoying the open roads that stretched beyond town. But these weren't just any bikers. These men moved with purpose. Their black leather jackets adorned with a familiar emblem, a reaper clutching a bloodied scythe. Max lifted his head, his body tensing as the scent of strangers filled the air. He let out a low, warning growl. Lily, oblivious to the shift in atmosphere, scratched behind his ear. "What's wrong, Max?" she asked, following his gaze toward the fence. From where she stood, she couldn't see them, not fully, just shadows shifting beyond the wooden planks. Voices murmuring. One of the bikers, a burly man with a snake tattoo winding up his neck, peered through a gap in the fence. He smirked. "She's right there," he muttered. Another man, younger, nervous, shifted uneasily. "Are we really doing this?" Razor said to wait. The first man scoffed. "We're just looking. Nothing wrong with that." But his fingers twitched near his belt, where a knife gleamed under the fading sunlight. Inside the yard, Max let out a sharp bark. Not his usual playful one. This was different. A warning, a threat. He stepped in front of Lily, his stance rigid, his fur bristling. Lily frowned. She had never seen Max act like this before. "Max," she whispered, clutching the ball to her chest. The bikers exchanged glances. One of them, tall, wiry, with a jagged scar running across his cheek, nudged the burly man. "Let's go. We don't want the dog spooking her." "Relax," the burly man muttered, but he took a step back. "We'll be back." With that, the group moved away, their boots crunching against the gravel as they headed back to their bikes. The engines roared to life, the sound fading into the distance. Inside the yard, Max didn't move. His eyes remained locked on the fence, his growls still rumbling deep in his chest. Lily hesitated before running inside. She didn't know why, but a cold shiver ran down her spine. She peeked out the window, watching as Max finally relaxed, circling the yard once before settling down. That was when she noticed something. A small mark carved into the wooden fence. A simple symbol, a reaper with a scythe. She didn't understand its meaning, but she knew one thing for certain. Something was wrong. The plan was simple, brutal, and effective. Razor had spent years stewing in prison, replaying the moment Ethan Carter had put him away, feeling the cold metal of the cuffs snap around his wrists. He had lost everything, his gang, his business, his freedom, but now, he was out, and he wanted Ethan to suffer in the worst way possible. Killing him would be too easy, too quick. No, Razor wanted him to feel helpless, just as he had felt all those years locked up. And nothing would break a man like losing his child. His orders were clear. Take the girl. Hurt anyone who got in the way. The two bikers assigned to the job, Snake and Viper, had done their homework. They had watched the house, noted Ethan's schedule. They knew when he left, when he returned. Most importantly, they knew Lily played outside alone, except for that mutt of hers. An old German shepherd. Nothing to be concerned about. A quick distraction, a swift grab, and they'd be gone before anyone knew what had happened. Late afternoon sunlight stretched across the backyard as Lily Carter jumped rope, her blonde hair bouncing with each hop. She counted aloud, her voice soft and cheerful, oblivious to the danger creeping closer. Max, ever watchful, lay nearby, his sharp eyes tracking the world beyond the fence. He wasn't relaxed. He could sense something, an unease in the air. But Lily's laughter soothed him. Then, movement. Snake and Viper had scaled the fence with practiced ease, landing in the yard as silently as shadows. They moved with precision, one coming in from the left, the other circling around the right. Viper, the smaller of the two, raised a hand and waved at Lily. His face stretched into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Hey there, kiddo," he called softly. Lily stopped mid-jump, her feet hitting the ground with a soft thud. She frowned, confused. She didn't know this man. Max, however, was already reacting. His ears snapped forward, his body coiling like a spring. A low growl rumbled in his throat. Snake took advantage of the distraction. While Lily's attention was on Viper, he moved in from behind, reaching for her with gloved hands, intending to silence her before she could scream. But she did. A sharp, terrified cry tore from her lips as she felt strong arms close around her. And then Max lunged. He wasn't just a pet. He wasn't just an old dog. He was trained. He had spent years in the field with Ethan, taking down suspects, sensing danger before it struck. His body, though aged, still held power. His mind, though softened by years of home life, still remembered his purpose. He went for the nearest target, Snake. His jaws clamped down on the man's forearm with bone-crushing force, teeth sinking through leather and flesh. Snake howled in pain, releasing Lily instinctively as he stumbled back, trying to shake the dog off. "Get this damn thing off me," he roared. Viper cursed and reached for his knife. He had assumed the dog would be a minor obstacle, something to be kicked aside. But now, seeing Snake's arm torn open, the realization hit him. This wasn't just a dog. This was a weapon. Max didn't let go. His powerful jaws clamped tighter, dragging Snake down. Blood seeped between his teeth. The taste familiar, igniting instincts buried beneath years of domestic life. Lily scrambled backward, tears streaking her face. Too scared to move. Too scared to run. "Hold still. Damn it," Viper hissed, stepping closer, raising the knife. But Max sensed him. His grip on Snake loosened just long enough for him to spin. His body still fast despite his age. He snapped at Viper's hand, teeth grazing the blade, making the man flinch. Snake was still cursing, clutching his mangled arm. "Screw this, man, let's get out of here." Viper hesitated, eyeing Lily, then Max, then the blood pooling on the grass. The job had seemed easy. It wasn't. Distantly, a siren wailed, not close, but close enough to spook them. Next time, Viper spat, glaring at Lily before grabbing Snake and hauling him toward the fence. They scaled it with difficulty, leaving behind drops of blood. Cursing the entire way, Max stood his ground, chest heaving, teeth bared. Even as the bikers disappeared, his body remained tense, ready for more. Lily sobbed, crawling toward Max, wrapping her arms around his thick neck. He licked her face once, reassuring, before turning his gaze back to the fence. Watching, waiting. The moment Snake reached for Lily again, Max sprang into action. There was no hesitation, no warning bark, just pure, explosive movement. Like a bolt of lightning, Max lunged forward, his powerful body covering the distance in an instant. His jaws locked onto Snake's forearm, teeth sinking deep through leather and flesh, clamping down with the precision of a trained canine. Snake howled in agony, stumbling backward as Max's full weight yanked him off balance. Blood spurted from the wound, darkening his jacket as he struggled to shake the dog off. "Get this damn mutt off me," he bellowed, his face twisted in pain. Viper, his partner in crime, was already moving, a glint of steel flashing in his hand as he pulled out a knife. His grip tightened, his breath ragged as he rushed toward Max. Blade poised to strike. But Max was faster, releasing Snake in one fluid motion. Max dodged to the side, the knife slicing through empty air. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from his chest as he turned on Viper, his sharp eyes locked onto the threat. Before the man could recover, Max lunged again, this time going low, his teeth sinking into Viper's leg just above the knee. Viper screamed, his knee buckling as he collapsed onto the ground, the blade slipping from his fingers. Lily saw her chance. Heart pounding, she scrambled to her feet and sprinted toward the house. Tears streamed down her cheeks. But she didn't let herself stop. Her small hands fumbled with the doorknob before she managed to push inside. Slamming the door shut behind her, with trembling fingers, she locked it and grabbed the phone, her voice shaking as she dialed her father's number. "Daddy, they're here, the bad men. Max is fighting them." On the other end of the line, Ethan froze. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel. "Stay inside. Stay low. I'm on my way." Back outside, the fight raged on. Snake, still clutching his bleeding arm, reached into his jacket, cursing through gritted teeth. His fingers closed around the cold metal of his handgun. But before he could pull it free, Max was on him again. The dog hit him full force, knocking him flat onto his back. The gun slipped from his grasp, landing uselessly in the dirt as Max's teeth found his shoulder. Snake screamed, thrashing wildly, but the more he moved, the deeper Max's bite went. Viper, still down, tried to crawl toward his knife. But Max wasn't finished. Releasing Snake, the dog whipped around and charged at Viper just as he reached out for the blade. Max clamped his jaws around the man's wrist and shook violently, sending the knife flying. "Jesus Christ!" Viper howled, kicking wildly, desperate to free himself. Then, the reinforcements arrived. The growl of motorcycle engines echoed through the street as 3 more bikers roared up to the house. They skidded to a stop, dust kicking up around their tires. One of them, a heavy-set man with a thick beard and a steel chain wrapped around his fist, jumped off his bike, eyes narrowing as he took in the scene. Max stood over Viper and Snake, his chest heaving, his teeth dripping red. The dog's body was tense, his stance unwavering. The bearded man cracked his knuckles. "Looks like we got ourselves a problem." One of the others, a lanky man holding a wooden club, sneered, "It's just a dog. Let's put it down." He stepped forward, raising the club high. Max didn't back down. His growl deepened, his tail stiff, his muscles coiled like a loaded spring. The man swung. Max dodged. The club slammed into the dirt, missing by inches. Before the man could swing again, Max lunged, his teeth clamping onto his thigh. The biker shrieked, dropping the club as he staggered back. The others hesitated. They had underestimated him. This wasn't just some backyard pet. They were dealing with a highly trained, battle-hardened animal, and he wasn't going down without a fight. Then, the sound of sirens cut through the air. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance. The bikers exchanged panicked glances. "Razor's not gonna like this," one muttered. Snake, still on the ground, clutched his bleeding arm. "Screw Razor. Let's go." The bearded man cursed under his breath but didn't argue. "Mount up." In seconds, they were back on their bikes. Engines roaring. The injured ones dragged themselves away. Limping, cursing, but still moving. Max stood his ground, watching as they sped off into the distance. His body still tense, waiting, ready. Only when the last engine faded did he finally relax. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. The moment Ethan Carter heard his daughter's terrified voice on the phone, his world narrowed to a single purpose: getting home. "Lily, stay inside. Don't move," he ordered, already pushing away from his desk. His pulse pounded in his ears as he grabbed his keys, his chair clattering to the floor behind him. "Daddy, they're here. The bad men. Max is fighting them." That was all he needed to hear. Ethan was out the door in seconds, sprinting toward his patrol car. He barely registered his partner calling after him as he jumped behind the wheel and slammed the siren on. The engine roared as he peeled out of the parking lot, tires screeching against the pavement. He gripped the steering wheel like a vice. His jaw clenched so tight it hurt. His mind raced. How many of them were there? Was Lily safe? Was Max still fighting? He shoved the thoughts aside. Panic wouldn't help. He needed focus. Grabbing the radio, he barked into it. "This is Carter. I have an active situation at my residence. Multiple hostile individuals. Likely armed. Request immediate backup." Static crackled before a voice responded. "Copy that. Carter. Units en route." The lights of town blurred past as he pressed the gas pedal to the floor, weaving through traffic like a man possessed. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, finally, home. As he skidded to a stop in front of his house, the sight before him stole his breath. The front yard looked like a war zone. 2 bikers lay on the ground, groaning in pain, one clutching a torn-up arm, the other holding his leg where blood stained his jeans. Their motorcycles were abandoned on the driveway. One toppled over. Scattered across the yard were signs of struggle, trampled grass. Lily's jump rope discarded on the pavement. And most striking of all, Max, standing over a third biker. Teeth bared, fur bristling, ready for more. Ethan's eyes flicked to the porch. Lily. She was inside, safe, watching through the window, her small hands pressed against the glass. Tears streaking her cheeks. Relief flooded him. But it was short-lived. Because then, Razor arrived. The roar of a Harley echoed down the street as a black motorcycle skidded to a halt at the edge of the driveway. A hulking figure stepped off the bike, moving with slow, deliberate purpose. Razor. His leather jacket bore the faded insignia of the Black Reapers, the gang Ethan had torn apart years ago. His face was harder now, older, but his eyes still burned with the same unrelenting hatred. And in his hand, gleaming under the porch light, was a gun. Ethan's blood turned to ice. Razor's gaze swept over the carnage, his lips twisting into a sneer. His grip on the pistol was firm. his movements steady as he turned toward Max. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" Razor muttered. Max growled, stepping forward, his muscles coiled. He knew the danger. He didn't care. Ethan moved before Razor could. His own gun was in his hands in an instant. His stance solid, his voice sharp and commanding. "Drop the weapon." Razor stopped, his gaze flicking toward Ethan. For a moment, there was silence. Tension thickened in the air. Razor sharp and suffocating. Then Razor smirked. Well, look who finally showed up," he drawled, turning just enough to face Ethan fully. But his gun didn't lower. Ethan's finger hovered over the trigger, his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. "You're done, Razor," he said, his voice even but laced with steel. "The cops are on their way. You have nowhere to go." Razor tilted his head, considering. His finger tapped against the side of the trigger. And then, he moved. A flick of his wrist, too fast. Too practiced. But Ethan was faster. Bang! One shot. Perfectly placed. Razor's gun clattered to the ground as he stumbled back. A howl of pain ripping from his throat. His hand clutched his shoulder, crimson blooming against his jacket. He swore viciously, glaring at Ethan with unfiltered rage. Then, sirens. Squad cars screeched to a halt along the street. Doors flying open as officers poured out. Guns drawn. Down on the ground, hands behind your head. Razor's jaw clenched. He knew it was over. Slowly, he raised his hands. Ethan didn't lower his gun until the officers had him in cuffs. One by one, the bikers were rounded up, shoved into the back of squad cars, their reign of terror finally coming to an end. Only then did Ethan exhale. His feet moved on their own, carrying him toward the porch. Toward the little girl who had been his whole world since the day she was born. Lily ran to him the second the door opened, throwing her arms around his waist. Sobbing into his uniform, Ethan knelt, hugging her close. "I'm here, baby, I'm here," she sniffled, looking up at him with wide, watery eyes. "Max saved me, Daddy." Ethan smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "I know." He turned, his gaze landing on the German shepherd sitting proudly a few feet away. Max's fur was ruffled, his breathing still heavy from exertion. But his eyes were clear, steady, focused. Ethan reached out, resting a hand on Max's head. The dog leaned into his touch. "You saved my daughter," Ethan murmured, his voice thick with gratitude. "You're a damn hero, Max." Max huffed, his tail thumping once against the ground. The officers looked on in quiet amazement. A single dog had taken down multiple gang members, had protected his family with unwavering loyalty, had stood his ground against impossible odds. One of them let out a low whistle. "I've seen canines do some incredible things. But this is something else." Another chuckled. "Hell, give that dog a badge." Ethan laughed softly, running a hand through Max's fur. "He doesn't need one. He already knows who he is." Lily knelt beside Max, wrapping her small arms around his neck, whispering into his fur. He licked her face. His job done, his family safe. As the squad cars pulled away, taking Razor and his men with them. Ethan stood on his porch, his arm around Lily, his hand still resting on Max. The night had been filled with terror, but as the first hints of dawn broke over the horizon, there was only peace. Max had won, and their family was whole. The flashing red and blue lights painted the night in streaks of justice, illuminating the battered remains of the Black Reapers as they were forced to their knees, hands wrenched behind their backs, the cold steel of handcuffs clicking into place. Razor, his face twisted in fury, struggled against the officers restraining him, but it was useless. His gang had fallen. His plan had failed. Ethan Carter stood a few feet away, his chest rising and falling with deep, steady breaths. His gun remained holstered. He hadn't needed it. Not tonight. He had raced home expecting the worst, fearing that his past had finally caught up with him in the cruelest way possible. But what he found instead was something he could hardly believe. His daughter was safe, and the reason she was still alive, still standing in the warm glow of the porch light, was sitting beside her with proud, alert eyes and fur matted with blood that was not his own. Max. The German shepherd's ears flicked as the officers moved around, rounding up the remaining gang members. But his body was relaxed now. His job was done. Ethan took a step forward, his boots crunching against the gravel, his heart still pounding from the adrenaline that refused to fade. He reached Lily first. She was shaking but whole, her eyes still red-rimmed from fear. The moment he opened his arms, she ran into them, burying her face in his chest. "Daddy," she whispered, clinging to him as though letting go would make it all real again. He held her tight, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "It's over, sweetheart. They're not going to hurt you." She nodded against him, sniffling, before pulling away slightly, her small hand gripping his sleeve. "Max saved me, Daddy. He fought 'em all." Ethan already knew, but hearing it from her, seeing the way she turned and looked at the dog with nothing but pure adoration, made it feel even more unbelievable. A few feet away, one of the officers was shaking his head in disbelief. "You're telling me this dog took down half a gang of bikers on his own?" "Not just any dog," another officer muttered, kneeling beside Max and examining him with the trained eye of someone who had seen K9 units in action before. "He's trained. Look at the way he holds himself. That's discipline. That's experience." Ethan crouched down, meeting Max's deep brown eyes. For years, Max had been his partner in the force. Together, they had taken down criminals, chased suspects through alleyways, sniffed out danger before it could strike. When Ethan retired, Max came home with him, settling into the role of a family pet with ease. But tonight had proven that the fire inside him had never truly faded. Ethan reached out, his fingers sinking into the thick fur around Max's neck. The dog leaned into his touch, letting out a low, satisfied huff. "You just saved my daughter," Ethan said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "You're a damn hero, Max." Max blinked, tilting his head slightly, as if he already knew. Lily knelt beside them, throwing her arms around the dog's neck. Max licked her cheek, his tail thumping against the ground. One of the officers chuckled. "We'll be talking about this one for years." He wasn't wrong. By morning, the news had spread. The local paper ran the headline, "Hero Dog Defends Little Girl from Biker Gang." The story made its way onto the radio, into online articles, and soon, the whole town was buzzing with admiration for the courageous German Shepherd who had stood his ground against overwhelming odds. People stopped by the house to leave treats, to ask about Max, to shake Ethan's hand and commend him for raising such a brave animal. Even the mayor called, offering to award Max with an honorary medal of service. But none of that mattered to Max. The only thing he cared about was that his family was safe. That evening, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the town, Ethan, Lily, and Max took a quiet walk down their familiar path. The breeze rustling through the trees. Lily held onto Max's leash. But they all knew it wasn't necessary. He would never leave her side. Ethan looked down at his daughter. At the way she smiled now. Genuine. Happy. No longer shadowed by fear. Then he looked at Max. His loyal protector. The quiet guardian who had never once hesitated when it mattered most. Some people called him a hero. To Ethan and Lily, he was family.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.